Okay, so I'm going to do these problems, and you should find this on your review pack. And when I do this one, you need to pause the video and then complete the ones under this in that section. So this is going to count as your review for your final. I'm not going to do much review next week because you have these 2 days. All right, what are the roots to this? Now, if you remember, the roots of something are where it touches the x-axis. So you should know that x squared would look like a parabola. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like to get you thinking back in the concept of quadratic functions. So if I go ahead and hit graph, you can see that that parabola never touches the x-axis. So, be logical about these answer choices. What do they mean? Well, roots are where they touch the x-axis, and if it doesn't touch the x-axis, then this one would have to go away because 1 and -1 are on the x-axis. You should remember that i's mean imaginary roots, meaning they don't touch the x-axis. So, how do you get i's? You have to do the quadratic formula. So, a couple of ways you can try to do this is to factor. You can graph it as I did and try to find the x-intercepts. Or you can use the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So here your a is 1, your b is 2, and your c is 2. So here we are. So negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared minus 4ac. All of that is over 2 times 1. Okay, so that would be negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus 8 over 2. All right, and that is negative 2 plus or minus negative 4 over 2. And then the square root of this, here's where the I comes in. If there's a negative under the radical, and that becomes an I. So the square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 4 is 2. And that's still not an answer choice. But if I have this number at the bottom, I can put the 2 into both places. So that would become negative 2 over 2 plus or minus. I'm going to switch that to I to be in that order divided by 2. And then that would go to negative 1 plus or minus I. So maybe you have to use the quadratic formula and all those in that section. I don't know, but I would try to factor first and then the quadratic formula second. And eliminate when you can. So negative 1 plus or minus I. So your answer would be B. So as I've said, pause the video and do the ones in this section. Then come back to it and you can move on to the next one. So the next problem, what is the value of h is needed to complete the square in order to find the vertex? So this is something that we haven't done in class, but you've seen before. And if you recall, this is a parabola, and this is the vertex formula of the parabola. So again, if I, just use some logic here, I'm going to graph this x squared minus 4x plus 9. And I'm just going to graph it and see what it looks like. And I can see, like if I hit trace, I can kind of see where that vertex is. And it looks like it's about at 2, so I'm going to just hit trace to enter. And sure enough, 2, 5 is at the end. So you know that this parabola right here has a vertex of 2, 5. But what this is saying is it's equal to this. And if you remember vertex form, this number is your x-coordinate of the vertex, and this is the y-coordinate of the vertex. So 5 would be here. But remember, just like the circles today in your lesson, you do the opposite in here. So it would be x minus 2 plus 5 is what you want it to look like. Okay. So, with that being said, let's look at our answer choices. If you can just graph it, you can eliminate two of them, because if the vertex is 2, 5, then that means it can't be A, because the vertex is -2, 5, and it can't be C. So that eliminates two choices. So now you have increased your chances much more into getting this one correct, if you had to guess. It's saying here that the H value is 2. So if I put in X minus, and then I put a 2 in for H, then sure enough, that is what I needed. So this one would be your answer. Okay. And just to show you what this looks like in case you need on the next ones, if I put a -2 in there, I would have had X minus a -2, and that would have become a +2, which is not what we need, because we need the opposite of that X coordinate. Okay, pause the video and do the ones in this section. Okay, now this section, which of the following is a factor of that? There's a couple of ways to do this. If you look back on your foldables, this has 4 terms with it, so I can try to factor this. So I can group the first 2 and group the second 2, and what would pull out of this was x squared, and I would have x plus 1 left. And what would pull out of this is -16, and I would have x plus 1 left there as well. And then these two are the same, so you have x plus 1, and then x squared minus 16. Now look at your answer choices. None of those are there. But if you remember, this can go down further because it's x squared. So x and x. And then you could do a 4 and a 4 and a plus and minus, because that would give you the next -16 and make the middle term go away. So now you have your answer because it's here. And now let me show you maybe an easier way to do that. If you recall these factors, define your roots. So if I go to my calculator and I just graph that, if I just graph it, you can kind of guess where it falls. So if you hit trace and it looks like it falls at -4, yeah, it does cross that -4, so that's a root. Well, if -4 is a root, let me get that pin there. If -4 is a root, then x plus 4 is a factor. If -1 is a root, then x plus 1 is a factor. So remember, you do the opposite. The roots are here, but then when it goes back into the parentheses, you switch the sign. So that's 2 ways to do that problem. So try the rest of them. All right, the next problem says simplify. So simplify means to just essentially distribute, get rid of those parentheses. So this x plus y squared means that you write this twice. It does not mean A. You do not square both pieces, and it can't mean this either. Okay, so you write it twice, and then you FOIL. So x times x, x times y times x, and y times y. So you have an x squared and a y squared. Now be careful right here, you're adding, they're trying to trick you here. This is one xy term and this is a yx term, but remember, multiplication is commutative, so I can move that around. If I have xy plus xy, that means I have 2 of those. So my answer there would be C. But as I said earlier, you can eliminate 2 of those right off the bat. This increases your chances so much of getting this correct if you had to guess. Now pause it and do those. Okay, which of the following is equivalent to this? So look, see if you remember how to do these. Okay, give you some time to think. Remember, we have a remainder here. And that remainder comes from synthetic substitution. So this says x cubed plus 3x squared minus x minus 3 divided by x plus 4. Now when you divide by x plus 4, remember you set that equal to 0 and get negative 4. And then you would put negative 4 in the backwards L. And then you would pull the numbers off of here. So it's 1, 3, negative 1, negative 3. Then you drop the first one, 1, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. So that means a couple of things when we were doing this. Logically, or the first lesson that I did was negative 4 is not a root because that's not 0. So we know it doesn't cross the x-axis at negative 4. But the implications here are division. So remember, if I start with a 3 as the exponent, this drops 1. So that's your x squared term, your x term, and then your number. And then 15 is your remainder, and it goes over what you're dividing by. So A is not it because that does not equal that. I have to get a remainder of negative 128 and have numbers 1, negative 11, and 37. So A is not it. Let's go ahead and try B. So this one's not it. So I would do negative 4, and then 1, negative 7, negative 7, 20. This is the one I'm doing. So negative 4 is in the backwards, they'll drop it. It's late. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my calculator so I don't, 37 times 4, so I don't mess up on that. Uh, 148, negative. And then if I subtract 20, or if I add those together, I would get negative 128. So again, here's my remainder. So that looks pretty promising because it's negative 28. Make sure it has the right numbers. So I started with a 3. That would be x squared minus 11x plus 37 minus 128 over what I divided by. Now this is not what I divided by. It comes from the factor x plus 4. And you add that, and that's your answer. Alright, so you have to remember synthetic division. Pause it and do the rest of them. Let's go to this one. Okay, these are my favorites. So when you're multiplying here, multiply straight across, but here I need to reduce if I can. So 4x squared minus 1, you factor each piece. So there's not a GCF here. So you would do 2x and 2x, so that's what I would try first. And then 1 and 1, negative and positive. And that's what that factors to. And then you do the bottom, so you'd have a 2x and an x. You have to get it to multiply to be negative 3, but you got the negative 5 there. So if I do negative 3 here and positive 1 here, I would get 2x squared minus 6x plus 1, which would be negative 5x, and then negative 3. So that's that factored. And then this factored. If you need help with factoring, Google it for today. Go ahead and look at someone else's work with that. Get some refreshing on that. So again, you've got this, and that switches it up a little bit. That would be plus 3 and minus 1, I believe. Okay, that's correct. And then when you're multiplying, you can just squish these together. And what happens, you cross them out if they're the same on the top and bottom. So I could cross 2x minus 1's out. I could cross the 2x plus 1's out. The x minus 3's out. And that's all that will go away. So here's your answer, which is D. Alright, pause it and do those. Alright, here's the next one. If you had a fraction equal to a fraction, Then if it's a fraction equal to a fraction, remember we can cross multiply. So 5 times x squared minus 1 equals 15 times 2x minus 2. And then you solve. So you would distribute. Get everything to one side. Since there's an x squared and an x, you can't get the x's by themselves, but you can get them to one side. I didn't mean to erase everything. So I want to subtract 30x, and then I would add 30, and then that would be plus 25 equals 0. Then you solve. So remember how to solve these. Went over this a little bit earlier. You can use quadratic formula, factoring, or graphing. So the easiest thing looking at my answers may be to graph it, but you can also factor that. So when I factor it, that's a 5, and then that would go to x minus 3, x minus 2. Okay, and that's not right. I've got that backwards. Negative 3 times negative 2 is not 5. I'll always make sure, guys, we can all make mistakes. So let's try this again. Let's try 5 and 1. Yeah, that works. So then after that, you set each piece equal to 0. And you probably recall what you do with this 5. 5 equals 0, you throw it away. There's no x with it. X equals 1 and x equals 5. So these are your solutions. However, remember that extraneous thing that I told you about. If I put 1 in the bottom of 2x minus 2, that is going to give me 0. Can I have 0 on the bottom? Nope. So 1 is thrown out. If I put 5 here, I would get 10 minus 2 is 8. And if I put 5 here, I would get 24. So those are good. So my answer is going to be only 5. All right, let's do the next one. Solve. So this one is a pretty straightforward one because there's only one x value. So to solve for x, you would add 180 to both sides and divide by 5. And then you would take the square root of both sides. Now remember, when you're putting the square root in the problem, you put a plus and minus. So x equals positive and negative 6, which is here. All right. For what values of x does f of x equals g of x? If f of x equals this and g of x equals this. So what is it saying? What x values are these equivalent? Well, let's set them equal to each other. So x to the third plus 3x squared, that's your f of x, equals x plus 3. How do I solve for x? Well, I can't do that since there's multiple x's, like just getting x by itself. So I have to get all the x's to one side. So subtract x, and now I'm going to take the 3 with me. Now recall, you can graph this or you can factor it. If you graph this, if I have it set equal to 0, your answers would be where they touch the x-axis. So if I graph that, you can see that it crosses at 3 places. So trace, it looks like it crosses at negative 3, and it does. Negative 1, it does, and 1, it does. So those are your solutions. So once you get everything set equal, move it to one side, and then you're just solving where the y value is 0. So your answer would be A. You can also do this by factoring. If you factor an x squared out of this one, I think it'll factor, and then you can factor a negative 1 out of this one. Remember, that changes the signs. And so that would leave me with x plus 3, because it's written once, and x squared minus 1. And then the x squared minus 1 would factor to this. And then you set those equal to 0, solve for x, and you would get those numbers. All right, pause the video and try the other ones. All right, during which interval is this graph positive? So this is a good one. You need to put this one in your calculator for sure. I'm going to put negative half as a decimal. It doesn't matter which way you do it. And what this is saying is, where's the graph positive? Where is it above the x-axis? Oh. And right here, it's above the x-axis. On this top part here. Right, so I need to find out where it's 0, and then I will know. Now, these can help you. 1 and 5 are the only numbers there, so 1 and 5 must be where it crosses the x-axis, and it does. This says x is smaller than 1, so it's saying on this side of the 1, the graph would be positive, and that's just not true. So those two are gone. And you have the same thing here. So it says the x value is between 1 and 5, which would be 1 and 5. So it's between here, and that's definitely where it's positive. Do you include 1 and 5? Well, no, because when you put those in, you get 0. 0 is neither positive nor negative. So your answer would be A. Alright, oh, you should do this one in your sleep. The graph of this is translated 2 units to the right and down 6 units, resulting in g of x. Which of the following represents the g of x? So here it is, 2 units to the right. Hopefully you know that right and left are in the parentheses, so these two would automatically go away. If it's to the right, then you do the opposite, so it would be A. Right 2 would be minus 2. And then down 6 would be minus 6. So you can see how they're trying to get you right there, because they have the 6 is the same. You have to understand the horizontal shifts. Okay, how do you find the inverse of something? If it's a function, you switch the x and y and solve for y. So add 1 and then divide by 5. So my answer would be B. Well, next problem. Right, we did this a few weeks ago. Solve for x. So x is in the exponent, so you would divide by 2. Then how do you get rid of e? You do the natural log. And what happens here is it goes away. So 5x equals the natural log of 17. And then if you divide by 5, and that's your answer. So your answer is B. Alright, which of the following circle and standard form state the center and the radius? You just did this on your homework, so I'll get you started. So this one looks a little bit different. You see how it's x squared and an x, and then your y's are split up as well. So the first thing you have to do is get those together, and you can move those, because as long as you keep the sign in front of them, you're okay. So that's the first thing I would do, is get the x's together, and then I would do what I taught you. Leave a blank, and then move the 24 to the other side with 2 blanks on it. Alright, go back and look at the videos from today if you need help with those. But you should be able to do that and state the center and the radius. Alright, and that is it. Finish all those questions on the review. Like I said, this is your review for the final. I'm not going to spend much time in class going over stuff. Have a good day.